Hello and welcome to this video tutorial on the anesthetic machine. The machine featured here actually resembles very closely the machine pictured in your book. So we are going to go through each component of this machine and make it clear where it is and what it does, just as we discussed in lecture. First thing to do when you approach an anesthetic machine is to go ahead and start with the source of oxygen, then follow the oxygen through the machine as though you were a particle of oxygen going through the machine. So the first thing to look at here is that we have an E-tank. An E-tank is a portable tank that carries oxygen into the machine. It's usually attached to the machine. This is as opposed to an H-tank. An H-tank is a much larger tank that is usually installed permanently in the back of the hospital and is connected via a network of green hoses through the hospital and to various machines. The first component is the yoke. This device here is the yoke. It has this dial which attaches the E-tank and secures it to the machine. From there, oxygen travels into the first component, which is right here. This is the pressure reducing valve. Pressure reducing valve reduces the pressure from a very high pressure of 2200 psi to about 50 psi, which is much more usable. The pressure reducing valve is also associated with the pressure gauge, which tells us how much oxygen is left. From the pressure reducing valve, the oxygen rises up this green hose here and enters this component found here. From the front, this component is the flow meter. The flow meter has this green dial which allows us to set the oxygen flow rate to the rest of the machine. Now a couple things can happen here. We can continue through the flow meter, which would reduce our pressure from 50 psi to about a 15 psi, or we can completely bypass the flow meter and the vaporizer by pressing this button right here. This button, this green button, is called the O2 flush valve, and pushing this will send gas straight to the breathing circuit, bypassing the vaporizer and the flow meter. It is important that the O2 flush valve never be pressed if the machine is connected to a non-rebreathing circuit. But let's avoid that for right now. Let's go through the flow meter. If we go through the flow meter, we will exit through the top of the flow meter on the back here and go through this hose here. We're coming out at about 12 to 15 psi. Then we will come back towards the front of the machine into the vaporizer inlet. The vaporizer inlet is where fresh O2 gas comes into the vaporizer. Now here we have a isoflurane vaporizer, which can only be used with isoflurane gas. So each vaporizer is specific to a certain type of gas. So we'll talk about the vaporizer later, but it is important that we know that we cannot mix and match vaporizers with gases. This is only a vaporizer for isoflurane. Oxygen will pick up isoflurane within this vaporizer, and then it will exit through the vaporizer outlet. This is where fresh O2 gas and mixed anesthetic gas is exiting the vaporizer, which then comes up through this hose and enters the breathing circuit. The first component of the breathing circuit in a circle system, which is what we're dealing with here, is a unidirectional inspiratory valve. The inspiratory valve will only flutter on inspiration, as shown here. It will not flutter on expiration. The expiratory valve on the left flutters on expiration. Associated with the inspiratory valve is a safety device or a safety component called the negative pressure safety valve. This valve allows room air to enter the machine should there be negative pressure encountered. Upon inspiration, the gas is taken through this coaxial cable, through the inside tubing, which is the blue tubing, and the patient inhales the gas, then exhales it through the outside part of the tubing, and that gets taken to the unidirectional expiratory valve. The unidirectional expiratory valve only flutters on expiration. It does not flutter on inspiration. Commonly associated with the unidirectional expiratory valve is a very important component located here called the positive pressure release valve. It's also called the pop-off valve. It has a dial which can be open and closed and allows pressure to either be released or build up in the system. It's very important to have the pop-off valve open during use. In a rebreathing circle system, as shown here, gas can be recycled. Gas is recycled by going through this CO2 canister. The CO2 canister takes carbon dioxide out of the circulating gas. Another important component is the rebreathing or reservoir bag, which catches excess gas in the system. Now, if we go back to the expiratory valve, we also see that the scavenger system exits this area. This is where gravity will take the exhausted gas down to the flare canister. This is the flare canister. Inside the flare canister there is activated charcoal, which takes toxic gas out of the gas before it is released into the environment. And with that, we have completed the review of the anesthetic machine and all of its components. Thank you very much for watching.